Get ready. We're about to read The God of Cake. This is not a children's book. This is actually from a web comic called Hyperbole and a Half. The author is Allie Brosh. And this is a true story. It's an actual memory from her childhood. Many of her web comics are like this, and she has a very unique art style, as you're about to see. As we read this, as we go through it, I want you guys to see if there's anything you can kind of relate to. I love this example. I love this webcomic, but I particularly love this one as a strong memory that Allie has from her childhood. So here we go. The God of Cake by Allie Brosh. My mom baked the most fantastic cake for my grandfather's 73rd birthday party. The cake was slathered in impossibly thick frosting and topped with an assortment of delightful creatures, which my mom crafted out of mini marshmallows and toothpicks. To a 4-year-old child, it was a thing of wonder, half toy, half cake, and all glorious possibility. But my mom knew that it was extremely important to keep the cake away from me because she knew that if I was allowed even a tiny amount of sugar, not only would I become intensely hyperactive, but the entire scope of my existence would funnel down to the singular goal of obtaining and ingesting more sugar. My need for sugar would become so massive that it would collapse in on itself and create a vacuum into which even more sugar would be drawn until all the world had been stripped of sweetness. So, 4-year-old self really liked sugar. So when I managed to climb onto the counter and grab a handful of cake while my mom's back was turned, an irreversible chain reaction was set into motion. This is for Grandpa, not for you. And so it begins. It's setting in. Cake. Cake. Cake, cake, cake. Cake, 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 cake. Cake is the only thing that matters. Oh God, so scary. I had tasted cake, and there was no going back. My tiny body had morphed into a writhing mass of pure tenacity, encased in a layer of desperation. I would eat all of the cake, or I would evaporate from the sheer power of my desire to eat it. My mom had prepared the cake early in the day to get the task out of the way. She thought she was being efficient, but really, she had only ensured that she would be forced to spend the whole day protecting the cake from my all-encompassing need to eat it. I followed her around doggedly, hoping that she would set the cake down, just for a moment. Her mom saying, "Stop it." Begging, whining. My mom quickly tired of having to hold the cake out of my reach. She tried to hide the cake, but I found it almost immediately. She tried putting it on top of the refrigerator, but my freakish climbing abilities soon proved to be an unsatisfactory solution. So there she goes. No! Oh, she looks so scared and sad. Caught in the act. Her next attempt at cake security involved putting the cake in the refrigerator and then placing a very heavy box in front of the refrigerator's door. Oh no. The box was far too heavy for me to move. When I discovered that I couldn't move the box, I decided that the next best strategy would be to dramatically throw my body against it until my mom was forced to move it or allow me to destroy myself. So here she goes, over and over and over again, running headfirst into the box, destroying herself. Surprisingly, this tactic did not garner much sympathy, meaning that what she was trying here didn't make her mom feel bad for her. And for some reason, she said surprisingly, "Get up. Go play with your toys." I went and played with my toys, but I did not enjoy it. I had to stay focused. I played vengefully for the rest of the afternoon. All of my toys died horrible deaths, at least once, but I never lost sight of my goal. My mom finally came to get me. She handed me a dress and told me to put it on because we were leaving for the party soon. I put the dress on backwards just to make her life slightly more difficult. I was herded into the car and strapped securely into my car seat. As if to taunt me, my mom placed the cake in the passenger seat, just out of my reach. You might notice her mom's face here. We arrived at my grandparents' house, and I was immediately accosted by my doting grandmother while my mom walked away holding the cake. Come to Grandma. And she's like, no, cake. She's pushing on Grandma's face. I could see my mom and the cake disappearing into the hallway as I watched helplessly. I struggled against my grandmother's loving embrace, but my efforts were futile. I heard the sound of a door shutting and then a lock sliding into place. My mom had locked the cake in the back bedroom. How was I going to get to it now? I hadn't yet learned the art of lockpicking, and I wasn't nearly strong enough to kick the door in. It felt as though all my life's aspirations, all of her dreams, were slipping away from me in a landslide of tragedy. How could they do this to me? How could they just sit there placidly, calmly, as my reason for living slowly faded from my grasp? I couldn't take it. My little mind began to crumble. I love how, when you're 4 years old, every small thing always seems like such a big thing. I can relate to that in my memories, thinking how big stuff like this was. So I love her drama here. So Grandma's holding her, the cake's been locked in the room. And then, right there in my grandmother's arms, I lapsed into a full-scale psychological meltdown. My collective frustrations burst forth from my tiny body like bees from a nest that had just been pelted with a rock. Cake! It was unanimously decided that I would need to go play outside until I was able to regain my composure and stop yelling and punching. I was banished to the patio, where I stood peering dolefully, sadly, longingly, through the sliding glass door, trying to look as pitiful as possible. She just wants in. I knew that the cake was locked securely in the bedroom, but if I could just get them to let me inside, maybe I could find a way to get it. After all, desperation breeds ingenuity. Basically, when we're desperate, sometimes we get really clever. I could possibly build an explosive device or some sort of pulley system. I had to try. But at that point, my only real option was to manipulate their emotions so they'd pity me and willfully allow me to get closer to the cake. When my theatrics failed to produce the desired results, I resorted to crying very loudly right up against the glass. I carried on in that fashion until my mom poked her head outside, and instead of taking pity on me and warmly inviting me back inside as I had hoped, told me to go play in the side yard because I was fogging up the glass and my inconsolable sobbing was upsetting my grandmother. So she's like, go play in the side yard. Your crying is upsetting your grandmother, instead of being sorry for her. I love it. I trudged around to the side of the house, glaring reproachfully over my shoulder, thinking how sorry my mom would be if I were to die out there. She'd wish she would have listened. She wished she had given me a piece of cake, but it would be too late. There's her glaring reproachfully over her shoulder. God, I swear I'll give her a piece of cake if you just bring her back, my poor baby. But As I rounded the corner, the personal tragedy I was constructing in my imagination was interrupted by a sliver of hope. I love this face. That moment when you think you might be able to get away with something. Just above my head, there was a window. On the other side of that particular window was the room in which my mom had locked the cake. The window was open. The window was covered by a screen, but my dad had shown me how to remove a screen as a preemptive safety measure in case I was trapped in a fire and he couldn't get to me, and I turned out to be too stupid to figure out how to kick in a screen to escape death by burning. Anyway, I clambered up the side of the house and pushed the screen with all my strength. She said. It gave way, and suddenly there I was, mere feet from the cake, unimpeded by a single obstacle. Nothing stood in her way. I couldn't fully believe what had just occurred. I crept slowly, reverently toward the cake, my body quivering with anticipation. It was mine. All mine. Here she goes. I ate the entire cake. At one point, I remember becoming aware of the oppressive fullness building inside of me. But I kept eating out of a combination of spite and stubbornness.
Please,
Just a sec.
go ahead.
Sorry, there was an announcement in the classroom. All right, continuing. But I kept eating out of a combination of spite and stubbornness. No one could tell me not to eat an entire cake. Not my mom, not Santa, not God, no one. I would eat the cake whenever I damn well pleased. It was my cake, and everyone else could go themselves. Let you guys fill in the blank there. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, my mother suddenly noticed that she hadn't heard my tortured sobbing in a while. She became concerned because it was unusual for my tantrums to stop on their own like that, so she went looking for me. When she couldn't find me anywhere, she finally thought to unlock the bedroom door and peek inside. Dun, dun, dun. And there I was. I spent the rest of the evening in a hyperglycemic fit. Alternately running around like a maniac and regurgitating the multicolored remains of my conquest all over my grandparents' carpet. I was so miserable, but my suffering was small compared to the satisfaction I felt every time my horrible, conniving mother had to watch me retch up another rainbow of sweet, semi-digested success. This is for you, Mom. Blech. This is what happens when you try to get between me and cake. Blech. I silently challenged her to try again to prevent me from obtaining something I wanted. Just once, just to see what would happen. It didn't matter how violently ill I felt. In that moment, I was a god, the god of cake, and I was unstoppable. The end.